All right, ready for this? We're diving deep, deep into the Magna Carta. You want the real deal on this old school document that's somehow still shaping our world today? Yeah, we gotcha. You're going in deep on the Magna Carta, what it really said, why it was a big deal back then, and why it still matters now.
It's wild, right? Like, people are still arguing about this document after 800 years. We're
Seriously.
going to unpack all that, maybe even bust some myths while we're at it.
We're talking the original 1215 Magna Carta King John, forced to sign by his own barons. They say it's the foundation of democracy, but how much of that is actually true?
Yeah, good question. We're going to have to rewind a bit to get to the bottom of that. Back to 13th century England, think feudalism, where your rights depended on your place in society.
Okay, hold on. Before we go too far back, why should we even care about something from 1215? It's like crazy old, written in something most people can't even read.
Because, believe it or not, you can see bits of this thing everywhere. Our legal systems, how we think about government, it all goes back. But you're right, context is key. So, feudalism. Imagine a pyramid. At the very top, King John. Not exactly known for being a nice guy, even for medieval times.
Let me guess, more like tax them till they drop kind of king.
Bingo. Tyrannical, the works. Crushing taxes, taking property, that whole divine right to rule thing. And the barons were not having it. They wanted King John to officially recognize the rights he was ignoring, and that's where the Magna Carta comes in.
So this charter wasn't some like democracy starter pack with a list of rights, right?
Yeah, not exactly. Think of a charter as an official decree, almost like a mini constitution. But this one was more like, sign this or else. The barons were basically saying, okay, John, here are the rules if you want to stay king.
Ground rules time. And Clause 39 really jumps out. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land.
Dang, that sounds familiar.
Right. That's where we get due process, the idea that even a king can't just lock you up without a good reason and a fair trial. That idea goes through history, to our legal system today, the right to a lawyer, the whole thing.
And it wasn't just about going to jail. Clause 20, man, that hits different these days. For a trivial offense, a free man shall be fined only in proportion to the degree of his offense, but not so heavily as to deprive him of his livelihood. They were worried about excessive fines back then, too. Oh yeah, this idea of punishment fitting the crime, that you shouldn't lose everything over a small thing, it's a big deal. It's still relevant in debates about bail, even with things like fines creating a cycle of poverty.
Whoa, okay, this is blowing my mind. Clause 12 is another one that's just, whoa, no scutage or aid may be levied in our kingdom without its general consent. Scutage, aid, help us out here.
Okay, so scutage, that was like medieval tax evasion for the wealthy. Basically, pay the king to get out of fighting his wars. Aid, that was just general cash grab. But the point is, this clause said NO to both of them without everyone's consent. This is huge. We're talking early seeds of representative government right here.
Wait, so this is like the ancestor of us voting for people to make laws about taxes. No taxation without representation, all that.
You got it. This clause, it's like the seed for parliaments, Congress, the whole system. Even kings had to follow some rules, power to the people.
This is starting to feel less like ancient history and more like the foundation for everything. But you knew this was coming. This whole groundbreaking charter thing didn't kind of fail.
Yeah, failed treaty to icon of freedom is quite the journey. It's like the little document that could.
So how did something that, like, got shut down by the Pope become the poster child for standing up to authority?
Because even though it got annulled, the Magna Carta, it stuck around. Like, it planted these seeds, put forth these fundamental principles that people just couldn't shake. Like, even the king has to follow the law, you know?
So everyone just forgot about the whole Pope thing and then just brought it back out when it was useful.
Pretty much. Throughout the 13th century, they reissued the Magna Carta multiple times, tweaking things here and there to fit whatever was going on. But each time, the whole idea of putting limits on the king, that just got stronger and stronger.
That's kind of cool, like how it took on a life of its own, went way beyond what it was supposed to be.
Exactly. The Magna Carta became this powerful symbol for anyone who wanted to challenge the monarchy. Parliaments used it against the crown, even to justify full-on rebellion against some unpopular kings. Talk about a comeback.
Okay, but fast forward a few centuries, how does something from England end up influencing the U.S. Constitution? That's the document for one of the most powerful democracies ever. We're talking some serious influence.
The Founding Fathers of America, they were really into English common law. And in the Magna Carta, they saw this historical example of fighting for your rights, due process, trial by jury, limits on government power. It's all right there in the Bill of Rights.
Hold on. So those American colonists yelling, no taxation without representation, they were channeling some 13th century English baron energy. That's nuts.
Direct connection. The Magna Carta, it gave them the words and the history to demand freedom, a just government. It wasn't just some old document. It was like a blueprint.
Blueprint for revolution. I like it.
And its influence, it went global. It's inspired tons of declarations of rights, legal documents all over the world.
So it's like the document's flaws kind of fade away and it becomes this pure symbol of freedom. But let's be real, this wasn't about everyone being equal, right? It was more about a bunch of rich guys protecting what they had.
That's true. We can't just force our values onto a document from over 800 years ago. But, and it's a big but, the Magna Carta, it was a turning point. It planted the seeds for so much of what we think is important now.
So more like an important step on a very, very long journey. Kind of messy, but hey, you got things moving.
Exactly. Fighting for liberty, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the Magna Carta shows us that even if it takes centuries, things like justice, fairness, rule of law, they have staying power.
Okay, so I'm thinking if we wrote a Magna Carta now, today, like 21st century style, what would that even look like? Where do we even begin?
Man, that's a big one, isn't it? It makes you really think about what matters most now as a society, What are the big threats to those things we care about? The original Magna Carta, it was all about the problems of its time. Our version, it would have to be about the stuff we're facing now.
So less about kings and barons, more about digital stuff, right? Like online privacy, what's up with AI, all that. I mean, nobody back then was worried about someone stealing their identity on the internet.
Exactly. The digital world, it creates all these new questions about our rights, about freedom. How do you protect free speech when you have trolls online, misinformation? How do we make sure everyone can even access technology? That's the kind of stuff our 21st century Magna Carta would need to deal with.
And it's bigger than just the internet, right? Climate change, the gap between the rich and poor, all the stuff happening with democracy around the world. Feels like we're living through some serious history in the making.
We are at a turning point, yeah. And that's exactly why looking back at something like the Magna Carta matters so much. Remember those barons standing up to King John? We have to do the same. Hold our leaders accountable, make sure our institutions work for everybody, not just a select few.
So our modern Magna Carta would be about things like economic justice, taking care of the planet, making sure everyone can get health care. It's about basic human dignity, not just politics.
Yeah, 100%. It needs a global view, but action has to be local. We got to face it. The world's all connected. We're in this together. And honestly, that means talking to each other, even when we don't agree. Finding common ground is more important now than ever.
Sounds like a tall order, but hey, so Michael was going up against a king back in 1215. And look at the impact that one document had, even with its flaws.
Right. It proves we can challenge power, that change is possible, and the fight for justice, it never really ends. The Magna Carta, it's not just a history lesson. It shows us what we can do when we come together for something better.
This whole conversation has been pretty inspiring. But to bring it back, why should we care about this document that's like over 800 years old? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Because it shows that the freedoms we have, the ones we don't even think about sometimes, they were fought for hard. And we could lose them if we don't protect them. The Magna Carta reminds us that we're all part of this big story, this constant push for a more just world.
And those ideas, justice, fairness, a government that actually works for the people, those never get old. So next time someone says the Magna Carta is irrelevant, remind them it's all around us. It's in our laws, our governments, even the values we try to live by. What would you put in a Magna Carta for today? What rights are you willing to stand up for? Think about it. It's something worth thinking about. Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.